You've probably heard those incredible words before. That's Jawaharlal Nehru announcing the birth of an independent India to the entire world. But who was the man behind that voice? Who was this person tasked with building a brand new nation for hundreds of millions of people?
Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to be talking about Jawaharlal Nehru, India's very first prime minister and really the main architect of modern India. From a freedom fighter to a nation builder, his story in so many ways is the story of India itself.
So you have to wonder, how does a guy born with a silver spoon, with every advantage you can imagine, end up as a revolutionary leader against the British Empire? Well, his story is all about a huge personal transformation.
Now just look at the contrast here. It's kind of wild. Nehru comes from a super powerful family, he's educated at the most elite British schools you can think of, Harrow, Cambridge, and he's trained as a lawyer, a pillar of the very system he was about to spend his life trying to tear down. His return to India in 1912, well, that changed everything.
Yeah, even though he was all set up for this cushy, profitable career in law, Nehru just wasn't into it. He found the courtroom pretty dull, actually. The real action, the thing that really lit a fire in him, was the growing movement for India's freedom. That became his real job.
And this is where things really kick into high gear. Nehru goes from just being a supporter to being a central leader in the fight. He links up with Mahatma Gandhi, and together they start pushing the whole independence movement in a much more radical direction.
So this is a really crucial point. Up until the late 1920s, a lot of the freedom fighters were asking for something called dominion status, basically self-rule inside the British Empire. But in 1929, Nehru steps up as president of the Indian National Congress and says, nope, not good enough. He demands Purna Swaraj, complete, total, absolute independence. No more ties.
And you can just feel the power in this quote, right? These are Nehru's own words from a declaration he wrote. This wasn't just some political maneuvering. It was a moral stand, a powerful claim that a people have a right to their own country, their own destiny.
And that stand came at a huge personal cost. For organizing protests and acts of civil disobedience, Nehru spent a jaw-dropping total of over 9 years of his life locked up in British prisons. We're talking about multiple arrests scattered across years.
So the struggle works, India wins its freedom. But fighting for freedom is one thing. Actually building a country from scratch, that is a whole different ballgame. In 1947, Nehru, the revolutionary, had to become Nehru, the nation builder.
I mean, just try to imagine that for a second. You did it, you're free. And now, you're in charge of one of the biggest countries on Earth. Where in the world do you even begin? The challenges were just staggering.
And this is just a quick look at the absolute chaos he walked into. The country was literally torn in two by the bloody partition. You had over 500 little kingdoms that somehow had to be brought into the fold. Most people were extremely poor and couldn't read or write, and on top of all that, you had to write a constitution and deal with explosive religious violence. And then, as if all that wasn't enough, just a few months into independence, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. Nehru's speech to the nation that night just captured this profound sense of shock and loss. It was a national tragedy, but it also, in a way, helped solidify the authority of the new Indian government under Nehru's leadership.
Okay, so faced with all these crises, Nehru didn't just wing it. He had a very clear, very ambitious blueprint for what he wanted modern India to look like. Let's take a look at the key pillars of that vision.
First, and maybe most important, was secularism. In a nation that had just been ripped apart by religious violence, Nehru was absolutely insistent that the government had to be neutral. The state wouldn't have a religion. Instead, its job was to protect all religions equally.
Now, for the economy, he went with this idea of a mixed economy. He believed that to really become a modern nation, India had to industrialize, and fast. So the government would step in to build the big stuff, steel plants, dams, power grids, while still leaving room for a private sector to grow alongside it.
And then there's his foreign policy, which was a huge deal at the time. This was the peak of the Cold War, right? The world was splitting into two camps. And Nehru basically said, India's not joining either side, we're not picking Team USA or Team USSR, we're going to carve our own path. He called it non-alignment.
This really breaks it down. You had the two superpowers demanding that every country pick a side, join their military alliances. Nehru's vision was this third way. It was a radical idea that allowed India to stay independent on the world stage and, pretty cleverly, get help and aid from both sides. And this wasn't just theory. You can still see and touch the results of that vision today. His government founded world-class institutions, the IITs for engineering, AIMS for medicine. He pushed literacy with programs for free primary education. These were the actual bricks and mortar he was laying for India's future.
Nehru was prime minister for 17 years. I mean, that's a long time. And for most of it, he was incredibly popular and successful. But his final years in office brought one of the biggest and most painful tests of his entire life.
I mean, just look at these election results. 3 times in a row, he led his party to these massive landslide victories. This shows you the incredible amount of trust the Indian people placed in him. For almost 2 decades, politically, the man was untouchable.
And then, 1962, the war with China. It was a short, brutal, and humiliating defeat for India. It completely exposed how unprepared the military was, and for Nehru, who had put so much faith in a peaceful relationship with China, it was a devastating personal blow. People who knew him said he was never really the same after that.
Nehru died in office just 2 years later, in 1964. So, how do we sum it all up? How do we look back on his legacy? He's easily one of the most important world leaders of the 20th century, and everything he did is still being debated in India today.
So he's remembered as the architect, the guy who laid the foundations for a democratic, secular India. He coined that famous phrase, unity in diversity. His birthday is celebrated as Children's Day in India. But at the same time, his economic policies, his foreign policy decisions, they're all heavily criticized now too. He's a figure who is both deeply loved and intensely debated.
Which really leaves us with this final thought. You know, building a nation is a messy, complicated, and never perfect business. And for India, a country that is still living in the house that Nehru built, the question remains, how should it remember its first, and maybe its most complicated, architect?